Hello everyone, it's Mr. Martin. Today I'm going to walk you through our next project here. And our next project is going to be creating an Etch-a-Sketch. For those of you that don't know, this is an Etch-a-Sketch where you can turn these knobs here controlling the left, right, up and down, and to create fun little drawings. It's a cool classic old school toy. You can then shake the screen and erase it. And we are going to make that today using JavaScript, so doing some of the programming we've been doing on open processing, and some of our supplies that we have here. So here's what you should have today to do this project. You should have a box. So for this, I use the top of a shoebox. Didn't use the whole thing. That way I can access the underneath panel really easily. You're going to need your knobs, and for some of you, those are plastic Gatorade, Powerade bottles. I've also gone ahead and 3D printed some, so you might be using those as well. You're going to need a whole bunch of wires. You're going to need 5 of these straight wires that have a straight connector, either because the wire's been stripped or you have a little straight plug for putting into the back of the Makey. You will also need 6 alligator clips. They're called alligator clips because the teeth look like an alligator. You will then also need the variety of screws and bolts that I provided for you in your kits. You will need a Phillips head screwdriver of some sorts. You will need conductive tape. And now for this, we're going to use a variety of conductive tape. I've given you some really thin copper conductive tape. And then some of you also have a big sheet of metallic conductive tape. If you're here at school, you might, instead of the tape, use some conductive paint. But for those of you at home, I did not have a way to give you a little bit of conductive paint, so you're going to use the tape instead. Lastly, of course, you will need your Makey with the USB power cord. So that is everything we're going to need. I'm also going to use a drill. You do not have to have a drill. You can just use a pencil to punch through the cardboard, but it's going to make it a little easier for me. So here we are. Step number 1. You are going to take your bottle caps. Take one of them. And now we're going to trace the position of where we're going to place the knobs. I'm going to hold one down, use a writing utensil. You can use a pencil, pen, Sharpie. It does not matter. We just need to trace around so we have an idea of where it's going to be. So trace the position of the first knob, and then try to match it up and trace the position of the second knob as well. So this is where we are going to place the knobs. You can then either push straight through and punch a hole in so it's right in the center. You can use anything narrow, sharp, it's just cardboard. I'm just using the drill because I have it and because it's fun. So that's step number 1. Get the positions of the knobs and the center holes ready. Next step, step number 2. We need to use either our metallic tape that I've given you, the big sheets of it, or the conductive paint. Either one works. And what we're trying to do is to create just little spots of a conductive material right here on the sides of the knobs. So if you're using tape, you're going to have to cut that out, actually. So you're going to have to cut little strips, kind of a rounded shape, and place it along the edge of that. I'm going to use the paint because it dries surprisingly quickly. So I'm going to just use a little bit here, my conductive paint. If you're using paint, it will take, I don't know, a minute or so to dry, but you have other things that you can be working on as well. And what you are looking for when you paint this is kind of almost like a little kidney or bean shape. We're just going on the outsides here, not all the way to the middle. away from the center dot. You don't want it over the center dot. Just want it on the outside. So if you're cutting some of the conductive tape, want to cut it kind of in a shape like this, almost like parentheses actually would be a good example. You want to leave in between at least, I would say, a ½ an inch between these two spots right here and these two spots right here, because you don't want to connect those. Then your circuit's going to be broken and it's not going to function. Right. Going to do my painting over here. This doesn't have to be super 100% accurate. You can see I went a little too close to the center. But that's okay. It's still going to work, I hope. Leave a little more of a space right there. All right, now we're going to let that dry. Close this up because I don't want the paint to dry out. I feel like Bob Ross right now, but that's okay. Next step. In the collection of screws that I gave you, you are going to look for the 1/4 inch pan head screws. Like that, they're tiny. Pan head, they're nice and flat. And you're also going to need a washer. You're going to put the washer over the screw. And you are looking to put, you can either punch a little hole if you want, or because the screws are sharp, they should just go right through. You can start poking it through right there. Then use your Phillips screwdriver to screw it into the cardboard. Kind of pushing down to make sure you tear through it. But you want to make sure that the washer is connected to the conductive paint or the tape right there. So if you're using tape, you got to make sure it doesn't wrap around the tape. You want to make sure it pokes. Actually, I gave you the wrong screw size. Hold on. Ignore me on that. We don't want the short screws. I skipped ahead a step in my brain. So, scratch that. Ignore what I just said. Punch a hole through right near the edge. You're going to still use the washer, but you're going to use one of your longer screws. That one's too big. There you go. One of the longer screws. And you're going to get that all the way through and just push it down. You're going to do the same thing on the left side. Punch a hole in the bottom of the circle, still within the paint or the taped area. Take a washer and take one of your screws, place it through, push it all the way through. And now we're going to flip to the back end here, the opposite side. You're going to use one of the cap nuts that we have, and you're going to tighten it down so it doesn't go anywhere. You can put a washer there if you had extra washers. It's not going to serve any point here because it's not really going to rip through the cardboard, so you'd be fine. You want it pretty tight here because you don't want those to fall out. So tighten it with your hand, and that is fine. Do the same thing with your other bolts. Place it here. Maybe. Shaky hands. Good stuff, huh? Oops, that's right. Got the wrong size. Hold on. Too many different ones in here. And tighten it down. Oops, sorry, my hat just hit that a little bit. You're going to tighten it all the way by hand. See, it's right there. And then, got those two, and you're going to do two more. Bottom lefts. So you're within the paint or the taped area, about even with the other screw you just put in. You could do all 4 at once if you wanted to. You could do 2 at a time. I was just letting that paint dry on that side because I got a little globby on that paint. So push that through and push this through. And then you're going to tighten those at the back end as well. Now what these are going to do, it's going to serve 2 purposes here. We're eventually going to have some of our alligator clips connected on the back end to these bolts. And it's going to help create the circuit and close the circuit off. We're then going to put the ground wires through the screws that go to the center here, because when I showed you in the last video, you have to be grounded for the circuit to be complete, and this is how we're going to do it. So these are going to act kind of as 2 purposes: to create the connection between the ground wire, excuse me, and the wire connected into the Makey, and to also serve as a stop so we don't twist this knob all the way around and bend up all of the wires. So you can set that aside for a little bit and let the paint dry as you prep our next part here. And on our next part, we need our knobs, and we're going to need some of our thin conductive tape. Move that stool out of the way. So you're going to tear off a piece of the conductive tape. Now this stuff's pretty brittle and it gets kind of goofy, so you don't want to just rip the whole piece off, because if you do that, because it's so thin, it's just going to wrap itself up like that, and you're not going to be able to use it. So what you want to do is you're going to tear off the amount that you need, and you're just going to peel off a little tape at a time, not all of it. So we are going to place it over the center point here. If you're using a bottle cap from home, you're going to want to drill a little hole in here, and you're going to put it all the way down to the bottom. You're then, actually, let me aim this. Notice you have the little holes on the side as well. Again, if you're using a bottle cap from home, you're going to want to drill a tiny little hole right there. If those are using the 3D printed parts, I've got that for you already. You're going to work this so it presses all the way down, wraps in front of this hole, so covers it. Oops, see, I told you the tape tears super easily, which is fine. The nice thing about conductive tape is you can just layer another piece over it. It's going to work just fine. You're going to bend it over the hole on the top there, on that end, and then you're going to continue it all the way. So if you tear, just put a piece of tape and make sure it's overlapping. That way the currents will still be connected. You're going to wrap this all the way over the top, so it's covering that hole as well. So you're going to get a nice connection with the center bolt that we're going to put in there at the top and at the bottom pretty easily. You're going to take now the little screw I talked about earlier, tiny little 1/4 inch one, and you're going to run it through that hole that's in the side. Now make sure you press it and kind of hold it in place with your finger here, because you don't want the tape to twist around the screw. You want it to be sure that it is puncturing all the way through. You can just use your finger there to hold it in place. So now this screw here is what's going to make the connection. When you spin it, this screw that has got the conductive tape touching it, this screw is going to be what touches the knobs on the side here, the bolts that you put in, and that's going to make a connection, and that's going to complete the circuit. You then want to take either some of the thin tape that you have, or you can take the thicker electrical tape. You want to tear off kind of a little strip of it here. This part gets a little tricky, especially if you got fat fingers like I do. you want to wrap it under this bolt that you just put through, or the screw. Sorry, it's not a bolt. You're going to wrap it under the screw you just put through. Wrap it around so it's touching it and it's making contact. And then bend it back over, almost like you have a little soft brush. Now this one's a little long, but it should still work. I'll probably bend it in half again, right here. Make sure your piece is thin enough where it's not going to touch that center bolt, which mine kind of looks like it's going to. Pinch it down, make sure it's taped really well. And so this, right here, this little brush, is going to brush against the paint. And that is important, because that's how we're going to make contact with that whole conductive surface. So, you're going to want to do that well. Use, again, either the thick silver tape, or you can use the thin copper tape. But make sure that's on there, and you don't want that bit to fall off. So make sure it is on there pretty tightly. Then you're going to poke a hole through the center there, either something sharp, or you can use your drill if you have it. I wouldn't actually turn the drill on, I would just press it through to poke a hole. You're going to take one of your longer bolts again. You're going to push it all the way through, and now through the knob here. And then on the back end, you'll tighten it up with one of the nuts that you are using. Now my knob that I have here is not a great size. It's actually the prototype that I printed. The new ones that I gave you are going to work a lot better and give you, it's going to clear down behind this a little better. Then, now you want to make sure it's loose enough to turn, but not so loose that it feels like you're going to rip the whole thing off. So mine's good. The stop mark stops work. They stop it from continuing to go, so that's good. And you're going to do the same thing over on this side, the step I just showed you. So repeat the exact step, just like I just said. Run the tape all the way through, put the stop screw in there, and then, so pause the video or rewind and go back to this part and do it again. And when you're done and you've come back to this spot, you're going to come in here. You should now have 3 bolts. Hold on here. 3 bolts on each side sticking through, all locked down with these nuts here, holding the bolts in place, tight enough that they're not going to magically get ripped out. Not so tight though where it starts tearing the cardboard. If you actually are using wrenches to tighten it, it's tight too much. It doesn't need to be that tight, because that's going to rip it straight through the cardboard, and we don't need that. So now the next part is we need to do some wiring with our Makey. And the wiring can kind of be up to you where you want the up and down, left and right. I'm going to wire mine, so this one sticking out right here, hopefully you can see it, is up. This one on this side is down. This one is left. And this one is right. Now the center ones for both are going to be ground. I'm just going to label that G and D. Those are going to be our grounds. So now you need your Makey and all of your wires. Now, normally when we used the Makey before, and we used it in the last video, we used the up, down, click, and space buttons, almost like an old Nintendo controller. For this, we're actually going to use the back side. And if you flip it over, you notice there's a spot, let me get it close enough for you to see, that shows the picture of a mouse. Not an animal mouse, but a computer mouse. And then you have these inputs that show up, down, left, right, and click. And that is what we are going to use. Because when we did the Etch-a-Sketch programming last week, we operate the Etch-a-Sketch by using our mouse. But instead of the mouse, we are going to use the knobs, which are going to input what to do to the Makey, which is then going to tell the program on the computer. So we're going to take our first wire, we're going to plug it into the up input. Then we'll take our next one, plug it into the down input. The left input, and the right input. And from here, we use our alligator clips. We are going to clip the up wire, which is the top one. We're just going to clip on there. I bend the wire over a little bit if you have bendable wire. If it's one of those plugs, you probably don't want to bend it, it might tear it. And then we clip it to the bolt running through from the knob on the other side. Take our next alligator clip, find the one that is the down, which is the second wire. This is down. Same thing. I'm going to clip the alligator onto the exposed part of the wire and then connect it to the bolt that is connected to the down. And then repeat for the left. Clip it. And for the right. To the bolt, and then to the exposed part of the right wire. So we've got all of our inputs wired up. Now we need two ground inputs, and the grounds are the ones that are down here on the bottom. So you can clip the little gator teeth through those two holes and then connect to the center of this knob. Last one, wire number 6, is the other ground. Connect it right there. And to the, it's getting kind of messy here, the ground wire going through the center of the knob. It's also holding the knob in place. So now you have it designed up, you have it wired. To connect the Makey, it's just like we did last time. We're going to take the USB cord, we're going to plug it into here, and then plug it into the computer. And as soon as you plug it into the computer, now it should be operational. So now you're going to go test it. And if you start turning the knobs and you notice something that it's not operating, more than likely, you're going to have to go back to the top and make sure that wire brush that you put on the bottom of the knobs is actually making a connection. Make sure all the ground wires are plugged in and make sure everything's inputted into the Makey. You can also check your code. There's a bunch of troubleshooting, but if you're having problems with it, first try to problem solve with some of the wire connections. Otherwise, contact me and we can share it over Zoom and look at what some of the issues might be. Good luck. Hope you have fun making your Etch-a-Sketch out of cardboard and plastic. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.